a few players that the algorithm does not like. But before we get to that, I want to remind you guys the players that the algorithm doesn't like with their matchups going on into this week.
Well, I picked a couple of guys at each position to really quickly go through with you that are most likely going to be in everybody's starting lineups if you've got them. And I'm not necessarily saying to sit these guys, but just to expect a little bit less, or if you're in a really great position where you got someone else that's good to be able to slide in there, maybe this is the information that helps you out. And the first quarterback that I'm talking about there is a guy you're definitely not sitting, but if you're going up against him, maybe you can feel a little bit better about the fact that Cam Newton's going against Houston. Last week he was 19 for 39, 276, 2 touchdowns, 2 INTs, and another 36 yards on the ground, which is very good. But you can probably expect a little bit less of those numbers from him this week because he's going up against Houston, who plays really well against fantasy QBs, ranking number 5 toughest on the overall season. Now, Cam has a little asterisk next to his name because he has legs and dude can certainly run. But Houston also ranks 3rd toughest versus runners in the last month, not allowing a rusher to go for more than 10 fantasy points since MJD did in Week 12. So if you combine those two things together, it doesn't look like one of those 30-point games for Cam Newton versus Houston this weekend.
All right, so that'll be interesting. Very interesting news here in Houston today that Wade Phillips came out and said that he is not getting a vasectomy, but he is undergoing surgery tomorrow, and he's going to be out 10 to 14 days. So he will not be on the sidelines calling plays for a defense that was 32nd last year, ranked number 1 this year. I don't know if that guy gets a vote for Coach of the Year, but I wouldn't have any beef with somebody who gives him one. But any concerns there, Joe, the fact that Wade Phillips isn't going to be on the sidelines calling the plays this weekend, or no concerns at all?
Well, maybe not Coach of the Year, Jared, but free agency move of the year. I think Wade Phillips trumps any player. I mean, look at the night and day for the Houston defense. But that said, I don't have too many concerns here with the Houston defense changing just because Wade Phillips is missing a few days. The game plan's the same. He can dial in a lot of the schemes they're going to use, a lot of the joker plays they're going to utilize. And I mean, the personnel is already set for the game. And I'm trying, for some reason, I am hurting for his assistant's name. I think it's either Reggie Herring or Vance Joseph's going to take over for him as the interim in this 10-day span. But no big deal, I say. But I totally agree with Fantasyomatic here, and was called out by Jim Day. So here's to you, Jim Day. I've actually got some factual information behind my prediction now. I was not wanting to start Cam Newton in one of our certain questions as well, just because I'm worried about the Houston defense. Personnel, they're just so much more aggressive. I don't care if they don't have Mario Williams. They're getting to the quarterback, and they're going to wreak some havoc against Cam Newton. So, yeah, I would lead towards benching Cam as well.
All right, well, quick question from the chat for Fantasyomatic from my Uncle Anthem, who somehow I have a doubleheader this week. Not only am I going up against him in the first round of the family reunion league that we both got suckered into with a stupid scoring system and dumb way of playing. I don't know why they start the playoffs in week 15, but whatever. But the other one I'm going up against him is the NFC Championship in the Mirror League between my San Francisco 49ers and his Atlanta Falcons, although he's a Saints fan. But he has a question about the algorithm, wants to know exactly how it works, and why is Kevin Smith the 5th-ranked running back this week, because he is contemplating starting him against me, but he's just wanting to know how and why does the algorithm rank Kevin Smith as the 5th running back this week?
Well, first, this is assuming that Kevin Smith practices fully Thursday and Friday, and he gets a green light going. So, certainly watch those practice reports over the next couple of days, although it's looking good so far. They are talking about some positive things there. But in the event that he's healthy and he's going into this weekend, he's going up against Oakland, who somehow let a guy named Ryan Grant score 21 fantasy points in our standard scoring. Yeah, I think you might have heard of this guy.
Who is that Ryan Grant guy?
Yeah, exactly. He's kind of a strange-looking Gumby runner, but he managed to have a pretty good game against some Reggie Bush, of course. Had 16 of his own fantasy points, week 13. And the Matt Forte, even back when he was still, putting in a partial game, got himself 9 points before going out. Marion Barber filled out the balance with 6. All that put together over the last month makes Oakland the number 11 easiest matchup for running backs going into the game into this weekend. That's over the past month of data sample, and then you take that with the kind of production that we're expecting from him not only being part of the running game but the passing game, and then compare that to some of his performances if he was able to stay healthy. All of this has a big asterisk next to it, a big if, a big injury if. If he looks solid and everybody's giving him a green light, we like his chances this week as a guy that's going to give you some pretty good production out of the running back slot.
All right, well, a few more things to get to before we let you go tonight, and then Joe and I will be talking about our Week 14 disappointments and surprises, because I got one guy I want to ring out, a little pre-Festivus preview here for a guy that let a lot of people down, and that's always a fun show, so you guys definitely want to check it out next weekend, or next Wednesday night as we get to that, and we will preview the big Thursday night football game between the Jacksonville Jaguars, the upstart Jacksonville Jaguars, 41 points after firing their coach at the Atlanta Falcons. We'll talk about whether or not that offensive explosion will continue, and Joe and I will preview and talk about the What's Your Fantasy Playoff Challenge and the What's Your Fantasy NFL Mirror League as well. But we want to get a couple running backs to maybe that might disappoint. Like you said, these aren't guys that maybe you probably going to be in your lineup, and maybe you temper your expectations unless you just have a couple of other guys that are vastly superior in the algorithm. But who are a couple of running backs that the algorithms kind of saying maybe kind of slow your roll when you talk about these guys?
Well, I might even go so far as to say sit this guy if you have a wealth of talent, but if you just have to go with him, just kind of bite your lip and deal with it. But Rashard Mendenhall going up against San Francisco, you said it before, San Francisco just doesn't let you score on the ground. Not only that, but Mendy had a fantastic matchup last week against Cleveland. Really wasn't able to do anything with it. Of course, there were some, the cards kind of fell in a weird way, the way that the injuries made that game play out. But San Francisco give up the second fewest points to running backs, and no running back has had more than 5 fantasy points against them in the last month. That's pretty serious stuff, and Mendy isn't the best running back that they've faced in the last month either. Of course, you also got the issue with Big Ben being gimpy. He's probably going to start, but no lock, no matter how you look at it. But he's not the only injury to worry about there. Center Marquise Pouncey is probably going to be playing with the grade 1 ankle sprain this weekend. None of those things make me very excited about having one player left in my fantasy playoffs on Week 15 on Monday night, and that being Rashard Mendenhall. So I'm actually going to go so far as to say he's a sit, and that just, of course, depends on who else you have in your roster. But I'm not liking what I'm seeing with Mendy this weekend.
All right, really impressive that San Francisco, and I haven't done the research, but I want to say over the last 10 or 15 years, the fewest rushing touchdowns allowed by a team in a season, I believe, were 4. San Francisco definitely looks like they're going to break that, as they've only got 3 games remaining and haven't surrendered a rushing touchdown all season. A truly tremendous feat, and we'll have to see if they can go the entire 16 games without letting anybody in the end zone on the ground. It'll be pretty interesting. Who's another running back that you're looking to possibly avoid in this week?
Well, here's a guy that I would put under the temper your expectations list real quick, Marshawn Lynch. I mean, this guy has been an absolute Skittle-driven beast in the last 10 games. Definitely someone who you drafted really late and got a lot of RB1 starter production out of him. But much of it's been fueled by having some of the best matchups of any running back has seen all year. This week, though, he gets his first tough run D in Chicago. The Bears are the 4th toughest defense against fantasy running backs in the last 4 weeks, allowing only 11 fantasy points combined to opposing running backs. Besides Bush in Week 12, no running back has scored more than 5 fantasy points against him. He definitely got you into the playoffs. He got you through Week 14. He could be in your starting lineup, but he's not going to be the guy that blows the doors open and wins it for you in Week 15.
Yeah, and how much money, I need to hit up Darren Ravel on Twitter and find out how much money he anticipates Skittles has gotten out of the publicity for having him eat a few Skittles on the sidelines a couple of weeks ago, because the Feed the Beast signs and the Skittles, I thought it was awesome, people throwing Skittles on the field after he scored a touchdown, but my God, Skittles is getting some serious exposure, and they need to hook that guy. Maybe they should fill his swimming pool up with Skittles and shoot a commercial of him just swimming in a massive swimming pool of Skittles, because I'd enjoy seeing that. Joe, your thoughts on the Skittles exposure and Marshawn Lynch going up against the Bears this weekend?
Well, knew about the Skittles last year. We saw a little preview of it, and the folks that bought in are clearly happy because he's been so productive. I mean, there's just no question. But, yeah, this week I'm not as excited. I'm trying to temper my expectations as well because, I mean, looking at the bottom 5, top 5, whatever end of the bell curve you're on, is basically the 5th defense, best against running backs. You've got the 49ers we talked about, the Dolphins we've talked about, the Ravens we always talk about. They're death against running backs. Well, the Bears are pretty tough too. It's a good personnel, and just to rehash that 49ers conversation, they're so tough against the run. I thought they were cursing themselves by letting go of Abreu Franklin. Clearly, Isaac Sopoaga and Ricky Jean Francois, the Frenchie, getting it done at nose tackle. I mean, I don't care who they put in. That scheme is working against the run. So, yes, bench your running backs against the 49ers, but also against those Bears. Be wary. I would agree with Omatic here. Temper your expectations for Lynch this week.
And that stinks because I have enjoyed Marshawn Lynch. I've enjoyed the whole beast mode. I've enjoyed it all. And he actually was in town for Earl Thomas's birthday party a few weeks ago, or during the preseason. We talked about that, and kind of bummed I didn't get to bump into beast mode. But I do have I guess now it's a throwback Buffalo Bills Lynch jersey tee that I still rock around the house sometimes. It's going to be hard for me to bench that guy because he has somewhat carried me into the playoffs spot. It's going to be hard for me to bench him, but definitely going to have to temper my expectations. Now, I already talked about my problems in picking the right wide receiver. Who are a few you're looking to avoid this week?
Well, real quick, here's a guy we talked back a long time ago actually about some guys that we thought might be bust. One of the guys that I threw out there this year was Vincent Jackson, and my whole point for making that statement before the season started is that Jackson is a matchup play guy who had some really brutal cornerback matchups this year, and of course you spent a high draft pick on him, and he's not the kind of guy that you're going to sit in the fantasy playoffs. But if you just look at his production, throughout the year, I mean, he's going double-digit, blowout games, like single-digit 2 or 3 point games the very next week, and it's because of the matchup. So he's a total matchup play this week. A lot of that has to do with how the Chargers' offense is playing. But this week he faces Baltimore D, second toughest matchup for fantasy wide receivers over the last 5 games. They allow only 15 fantasy points combined to opposing wide receivers, all the wide receivers, that is. And except for Jerome Simpson in Week 11, no wide receiver has scored more than 6 fantasy points against them since October. And so Vincent Jackson isn't the kind of guy who's matchup proof. So I would see maybe that they might have a little bit of trouble getting him the ball and getting him a real breakout game that's going to win it for you in Week 15.
All right, I will say this. I just saw on Twitter as I was trying to hit up Darren Ravel that someone says that in that game, Tim Tebow put his arm around Demaryius Thomas after he dropped the pass and said, "That's okay, you're going to catch the game winner." I guess he was a little bit of a prediction there. I just don't know what to think about this whole Tebow thing, and I'm just in awe and shock about the whole thing.
It's a Festivus miracle, Jared.
It is a Festivus miracle, and we hope to have several more of those next weekend. Well, before we let you go, we want to get everybody out there to follow you on Twitter at Fantasyomatic. I know you do your best to answer lineup questions, so if you guys are listening to this on podcast, we always appreciate the downloads. We know you didn't get a chance to pick Fantasyomatic's brain, so hit him up on Twitter, just like it sounds, at FANTASYOMATIC, Fantasyomatic. You can always visit the website. You say, well, guys, you never talk about tight ends on the show. Well, that's a reason, among several others, for you to visit the website, and you can go up and down the algorithm and look at all the projections in their entirety at the site, www.fantasyomatic as well. So we definitely appreciate the time. We know you're out there on the West Coast, so it's a little earlier for you than it is for us, but we're going to try to tie a bow on this thing, get to our predictions. Anything you want to leave us with before we let you go, Fantasyomatic?
No, I just wanted to say to everybody out there, congratulations for being in the fantasy playoffs. Always enjoyable to talk to you two guys. I'll look forward to chatting with you on Festivus next week.
All right, my man. Well, we definitely appreciate it, and we'll talk to you next week, bud.
Sounds good. See ya.
Thanks.